Welcome, everyone, back to the Human Roll Season 2. We are now into Episode 4, where we are going to discuss payroll in banking. So, as I mentioned on the last episode, I am excited that I have another special guest to go over this topic. So, Jesse Stakes, he's the Vice President, Commercial Relationship Manager, and also founder and host of Making Sense of It All. So, welcome, Jesse. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Tiana, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So my prior co-host, Chris Wood, connected me with Jesse, and Jesse was actually nice enough to allow us to intro the Human Roll podcast on his podcast before we launched the first episode. So that was really, really nice of him. I remember as Chris and I were trying to decide on the name of our podcast, we got a little jealous because Jesse has a really cool name to his podcast, Making Sense of It All, and it's spelled really cute. So Jesse, I don't think you really knew that beforehand when we taped with you, but we were a little jealous of how you took like the cool name on the podcast side. So.
Well, I didn't know that, but I was glad to have you guys, and thanks for sharing that, by the way. It was an honor to have you. You guys have had a tremendous knowledge to share with my audience. My belief is people help people, and people work with people. So if everybody helped each other up, then none of us would be on the bottom. So I think that's if I could help in any way whatsoever to help you guys launch it, then it was my pleasure.
Thank you so much for saying that. And you are right. Sharing is caring, right? So that's why I'm glad to be able to have you back on and return the favor. But Jesse, so let's get into this topic. So I wanted to just start off by saying to my audience that Jesse does have a very interesting background. So just to correlate with the payroll and HR world and topic of my podcast, Jesse actually started, even though he's, on the VP seat and hosting his own podcast, he did get his start on the payroll side. So Jesse, if you don't mind just kind of giving background on your experience and how you got started and how payroll actually led you into the role that you're in now.
Just to start with, and I'll share this, the payroll industry is a lot of fun. It's actually my favorite role that I've ever had, and I feel like it set me up for success in anything that I've done since then. I actually got my sales career started at Paychex. I was in my 20s. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had a small company going where I was selling logoed merchandise, and Paychex actually, I'd gotten a tax penalty myself. And that's how I was introduced to the payroll industry, was through my own pain. I ended up being offered a sales role at Paychex, and I wound down the small company that I had kind of, I wasn't making a ton of money with it, but it was a great experience. It helped me kind of put me in a business owner's shoes. And I wound that down and I went to work selling for Paychex. And I found out that I really loved the industry. Payroll sales, everybody's a customer. Everybody has to file a tax return. Everybody who has employees is filing the same forms every quarter, every year. It's a common theme around all business. So I loved it. I felt like you could work all day and it was something new all the time. That being said, I excelled at Paychex, did well, but there wasn't a whole lot of room in our office for growth. The office was full of talented individuals, all of which have gone on to do great things. But I didn't want to move. I didn't want to leave Jacksonville. This is where my family was. So Wells Fargo at the time had bought Wachovia Bank, and I only knew they had a payroll service because I had friends out on the West Coast that sold against them. So I let some friends know at Wachovia at the time. I said, as soon as you see a payroll position posted, let me know. I'm very interested, because I thought it would be a tremendous opportunity to start something. And it was. I was actually one of the first people that they hired on the East Coast. I helped Wells Fargo build out a great base of clients in the Northeast Florida area over in the Panhandle. And then I also built a team through Florida, basically Jacksonville down through the Orlando area, Tampa area, and into Naples. Again, it was so much fun. You're dealing with people, you're helping them. You're actually, want to talk about a consultative sale, you're helping people drive efficiencies in their business, do things better. Like I said, I think you can tell by my voice, it was a blast. That being said, when Wells Fargo went through some of their issues and when they started to know that they were going to potentially be coming under consent order from the federal government, they started piecing off different businesses that they had, one of which being their payroll service. The payroll service made a good deal of revenue for Wells Fargo, but I think that they were just looking to kind of shrink down into their core businesses, and they ended up selling it to ADP. At the time, the gentleman that was running the area asked me to consider not going with their, not kind of following payroll out the door, but look at banking. and I liked the company. I'd had a great experience there. So that's what kind of drove me into a banker's seat, was the opportunity to stay with the company that I enjoyed working for almost 10 years. That being said, like I said, payroll's a lot of fun. Banking is a slower sales cycle. It's not, I would say it's not as much fun. It's not as, it's not as quick. It's also that my experience in banking from that point has also allowed me to see how payroll plugged in, how it was a sticky product for banks, how it drove additional non-interest revenue for banks. And it really allowed them to help customers in different ways rather than having to just be competitive on an interest rate or just be competitive on their depository or treasury services. So it gave me a great perspective to be able to not only explain it, but also understand from both sides the benefits and also the pitfalls.
Yeah, no, great explanation. So look, I'd say, I always say on certain episodes when I have guests on, payroll just essentially falls into people's lap. Like you don't you don't just seek out to go get a degree in payroll that doesn't actually exist. But it is kind of funny that how yours kind of fell. I know the tax issue and penalty probably wasn't fun for you at the time, but all works in good favor because then that led you to where you are today. So that is a very interesting story, a lot different story than what I've heard before. So really glad to share your experience in this industry. And then also really interesting that you built, the whole team on the East Coast side. It really goes to like how passionate you are. You can tell when you're talking, you're a lot, up talking a lot about payroll. And it's interesting because I know sometimes people think payroll is just a click of a button, and that's not always it. There's a lot that goes into it, right? There's
Sure.
so many granular details. And of course, if you miss one little thing, then you can find yourself getting notices. You can also, find yourself paying people wrong. And then that's never good for a business either.
Real quick, before we go anywhere else, I want to be clear. I did not build the full East Coast team for Wells Fargo. There were some tremendous people that are incredibly talented still that are in the industry or that kind of are industry adjacent. Gentlemen like Jack Ducanis, he had worked for ADP, Paychex, and he had had a tremendous payroll career, and he lent that to Wells Fargo to help build their East Coast division. There's all kinds of people that were very talented people in the industry that deserve a lot of credit. I don't want to take credit where it's not due. I was part of that process and I built part of that team, but definitely did not build the whole thing. So just wanted to make sure that people got credit where they deserved it.
Yes, agreed. Agreed. That just goes to show, how good of a person you are too, just to make sure everyone is giving credit there, because it does take a village to kind of build everything from the ground up. You mentioned that, of course, the revenue from the payroll side seemed to be doing really good in the banking world, and then also that, of course, the ADPs of the world came to fruition, but separately, it seems like there were other things going on the banking side that may have caused them to kind of just focus on their main foundation. Do you think that there could have been maybe like any other reason outside of that? I mean, I was curious on if potentially the revenue may not have been a good revenue stream for them, but I also wonder if just in comparing the revenue to other aspects of the business, if payroll was maybe a little bit lower on the totem pole, even though it was still doing good. Do you foresee that
Sure.
it could potentially make a comeback, or were there maybe more issues that came into play as to why they ended up selling?
I think there's always there's more issues than just one with any decision that people make. And from their perspective at the time, they probably felt like it was a good decision. When you actually build your own software and you actually do everything from tip to tail, soup to nuts, in the payroll business, it is not cheap to stand up that business. Software is not cheap to build. So you have a bill there. You have a cost that you have to compare to revenue. Now, when you white label something, or if you're licensing somebody else's technology, or if you're partnering and just doing a revenue share, those are different situations. And I think we see that a little bit more today than we have in the past, where businesses are much more apt to bring in existing technology rather than trying to create their own. So in that particular case, I think that there are other factors that played into it. But I will say this as well. You have a revenue stream that was doing nothing but growing. And so you have the choice between continuing to generate revenue from the expenses that you have already incurred, and that revenue source can potentially grow for you. Or on the other side of it, you do have this windfall event. When you sell a division, you can recoup all of your costs and you can go down the road. And again, in this particular case, still with your core business intact and from what you feel is your most profitable sources of revenue. I feel that in today's world, in 2024, banks' core source of revenue has changed dramatically in a sense that money now is more expensive. If you look at money market rates, if you look at CD rates, you can get 5 times what you were looking at 2 or 3 years ago, or as far as, interest back to you as an account holder. Conversely, though, if you go look at a loan right now, the rates on a loan are that much more for you to borrow the money. Banks right now are having an issue as far as their net interest margins being squeezed, and they still have to be competitive with each other. There's, if you look up the word bank, on Google, see how many organizations pop up. It's an incredibly competitive industry. And I think right now there's 2 things that are playing that banks need to look at. They need to diversify their income streams. They need more non-interest bearing revenue. And they also need to figure out how to make themselves look different than the next guy. Right now, they feel like gas stations. If you walk into one bank and then you walk into the other bank, right now, you might have a different colored check or you might have a different colored debit card, but you have the same services, the same products and services, no matter which corner you go to. So I think that there's an opportunity as far as when you ask if it could be applied in today's world, there's an opportunity to be more of a solutions provider to your client and to have a diversified set of products and services and still be a financial services or a financial consulting business for your clients and be able to diversify your revenue and be able to still be profitable, but not have to make as much on each individual product.
Coming from someone who was, just side note, trying to purchase a home recently, I got hit with anywhere between 7.6 to 8%. And that even the lenders were literally telling me, even with, my finances and good credit score, it was like insane. So they were almost like encouraging me not to buy. It was very weird. So that's one thing too. And that is a really good explanation on banks, because I always also say this about payroll systems is that essentially the foundation is the same. Essentially, they all have to provide similar things. What really makes you different? And I feel like in the payroll banking world that you're speaking to, really adding this extra layer does set certain banks apart from one another, right? On what services they can offer and gets them kind of away from just what everyone else is doing, right? It's that separate, I think it's called like the blue line, right? The blue ocean that kind of like keeps
Sure.
them separate from like the Red Sea. Curious, one other question I had, when you had clients on the payroll side of things, were those clients local into like just your local city or like local state that you maybe knew one on one, or were those clients that were also maybe outside of different states that were a little bit further based on their location?
To me, people deal with people. So I like in when I carried a client, a book of clients, my clients were diversified. I had a lot of folks that were local because that's where you have your immediate relationships. But I've always generated relationships outside of my immediate area, or you have referrals that come in from clients or from other trusted advisors such as CPAs or bankers or anybody else. So when I carried a book, my book was diversified when it came to different tax codes that I had to deal with as far as state and local governments.
Yeah, no, good. I also feel like that home feel, right? That local feel, them probably knowing you one on one and you being maybe right around the corner, probably also help them with the referrals too. Cause I know even me working for larger companies, of course, you can build that relationship with people over the phone. And of course, you can always fly to meet them and, make sure you see them face to face. But there's a different type of feel when you know that someone's right up the street, or when, they're able to stop in office and you're able to put that face more frequently together. So just as curious about that with your book of clients. I mean, you seem to know all of the foundation and all of the bases needed. Any thoughts around if this will make a comeback at all? Do you think that maybe with the purchasing of everything that maybe there's a contract where banks can't get back into this world, or maybe they feel like the juice isn't worth the squeeze per se, but do you think that there could be a comeback with banking getting back involved on the payroll side of things?
I always believe in the saying, never say never. Like I said, banks are looking for revenue sources. The other thing that's happened right now is technology has gotten a lot better as far as white labeling or being able to have one system talk to another system. Challenges that maybe existed 10, 15, 20 years ago, as far as white labeling a product or partnering with another service, a lot of those barriers, they don't exist, or they're much easier to get around in today's world. That's where technology helps so much. To your point, and to what I said earlier, I always believe that people would prefer to deal with people. But what technology does is it allows us to deal with people more efficiently or to get better at what we do. So the answer to the question, short answer, I do believe that in some way, fashion, or form, it will make a comeback. I believe that as executives and as the folks who make decision at these larger financial institutions have to make decisions, at some point they're going to say, I'd rather add revenue streams than cut good people. Because you cut people and then you're going to lose clients. So I do believe that it's an incredible opportunity. I think it just takes some creative thinking. I think it takes some people just willing to get outside their box and say, okay, how can we do this better?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point too, there are lots of our larger payroll systems that are merging with one another, or they may be really good in like two or three functions, but they need to kind of pass off and kind of work with another provider to another HCM provider. So yeah, I mean, look, I will definitely keep my eye out from the banking side, just because I know how important payroll is. I feel like as technology takes over, people are still going to really want that interaction with one another, right? And I think that could be a good revenue stream for the banks to pick back up on.
One thing real quick, and this is it's another way that it helps banks to the point where people help people. It also helps these trusted advisors that are bankers or that are relationship managers. It allows them to be more consultative. Instead of constantly trying to think, how can I fill my buckets that I have to fill to keep my job or to get paid? They can think, okay, what products and services actually benefit my clients? I had a conversation with somebody, this was several years ago, with a bank, as far as maybe looking at this. And it was one of the conversations that we had is that, they had an insurance service that they had where they sold health benefits to their customers. They had life insurance, then they had banking products. And the average amount of revenue that they received at a bank for selling insurance into a client was over $20,000. Well, that changes that whole relationship. And when you think about a pricing model, which a lot of banks use to price loans, instead of just looking at deposits, loans, treasury services, and seeing how can I price this loan, now when you put that $20,000 in there as revenue that's coming from an outside source, it allows you to be more aggressive as far as to price a loan. Not only do you win as the banker because you retain a relationship and you deepen that relationship, now your client gets better pricing on the other products and services that you have. That's the huge value to a bank, is that it allows them to be consultative. It allows them to be that trusted advisor and still make money doing it.
Great information and great selling point too. I think your ability to think outside the box, once a client kind of just sees, or once a company actually sees that clients are buying into one product, you are right. That kind of opens up the client to get, a better discount in other areas, but then also it's an eye opener, right, to your C-suite executives that, hey, there could be something here. And it would be good to maybe explore that a little more. So
no doubt.
Thank you so much, Jesse, for all of that information. And look, before, now that we've kind of just touched on the payroll side, I really want to touch on your podcast. So Making Sense of It All, where you get into details on people and, their experience and their industries that they are in. For my audience who has not seen it before, everyone, I will make sure to put a link in. So please go in and check out his podcast. But anyone who has not, come across that or isn't sure what it's about, feel free to give some more information. And then I would like to know also background on how that all got started.
The whole idea of doing a show started with a client of mine that I was doing a line of credit for. He owned a studio and then he also owned a software company. I ended up doing a line of credit for the software company, and he invited me to host 20, 30 minutes of doing little interviews with business owners to promote their business, but also promote the studio, promote their marketing company that they had. And it was Buzz TV in Jacksonville, Florida. A gentleman named Mike White. Thank you very much. Mike gave me the opportunity to host the show. And I found, at first I was really uncomfortable with it. I was like, this is way outside of my box. It's not something that I've ever done before. It took a couple of months for me to say yes to him, but I finally was like, okay, I'll do it. And the first time I ever hosted a show, I had all of my questions written on my iPad, like typed out. I've got it underneath the table and I'm sitting there staring down and just like nervous as I could possibly be. And it's just funny because I can still go back and look at it and it just makes me laugh. I did that for 3 years. Loved it. It was a lot of fun. Like I said, got me out of my comfort zone, introduced something to me that I had never done before. And my thought was I'd like to go a little bit longer form. Like I wanted to do something that I had a little more control over, but also instead of going 6 to 8 minutes with, kind of a hi, who are you? What do you do? What makes you different? And really quick, thank you for playing. See you later. I wanted to dive in and I wanted to hear people's why. I wanted to know why they did what they did. I have small business owners that come on the show. I have service providers that help small businesses out or help individuals out, all kinds of people that I asked to join the show. And I love to hear their story. I love them to tell me what inspired them to do what they do and also why they still do it, what drives them today. And then position them as the expert that they are. Give them that mirror that they can reflect what it is, what the message is that they want to get out there. So that was kind of the why behind it. One of the big things, it's kind of funny. My wife and I were riding down the river. We were on a boat and you see all these beautiful homes on the river. And it's like, you look at it and you're like, I wonder what that person does. Or I wonder who lives in that house. And that's kind of what started that train of thinking though, was kind of looking at different things, whether it's a really nice home or if it's a car or whatever it is, and just thinking, I wonder who has that and what do they do? And, it's evolved from there, but that's kind of where it germinated from.
Yeah, I appreciate you explaining how you first got started in your first nervous episode. I've explained a couple of like my first oopsies in the payroll world when you're like first learning. This podcast episode was definitely not something that was on my radar, right? It was just something that was
Sure.
asked of me, and I was like, oh, okay, but there are still times where I get tongue tied, I start and stop, but to your point, it's always a good learning curve because you have to start somewhere, right? My thing now is progress over perfection. Like just go ahead, do it, get your nerves out. There's a lot of colleagues and friends of mine that have come to me now and are like, they literally have had these great ideas and they bought all the equipment and they may have not just had the courage to just take the first episode. And I'm like, I will sit with you, just tape it and put it out. Like, so yeah, so that is one good thing. I'm glad you had the courage to just get through it. And of course, when you first start, you want to be perfect. So you were well prepared, right? And you're nervous and you don't really know what to really look for. You may not have that foundation yet. It's good to know that you were able to kind of look back at it, laugh now, and look where you are. Now you're running your own podcast and having a lot of great guests on, which is beautiful.
It's my pleasure. I've tried to live my life and say yes. If it's one of those things to where I'm a little outside of my comfort zone, or if it's something that if I'm not sure, nothing crazy, not something on the wrong side of the tracks or anything, right? But if it's an opportunity, and if I know it's an opportunity, then my answer is yes. And let's see how it goes, or let's see where it takes me. The analogy that I always use is it's like jumping into a pool and swimming underwater. You hold your breath and you go. You try to swim and you try to get to the other side. And then once you do it once, you can do it again and again and again and again. And the more you do it, the better you get or the easier it gets. So I appreciate you saying it. And to me, it's been a lot of fun. The journey has been great. It's not necessarily I'm looking for a destination with it. I really do enjoy every single day doing it. So again, thank you for saying it.
No worries. I can tell also definitely why you are where you are, because the more you give back, the more you share, right? That just opens up a whole nother world for you too. And I'm sure people do want to talk about their businesses too, right? People want to get the word out there. And since we are in a technology world, this is the way to go about doing that. So no, this is great. Great conversation, Jesse. Really appreciate having you on and you just sharing your background, your story, podcast as well. As I mentioned early on in the episode, thank you so much. Again, I can't thank you enough for just at least allowing us to intro. Your taping was like my first jitters. I remember wanting to be like all together. And I'm sure you remember some of our conversations from that time, 6-7 months ago,
Absolutely.
up till now. So definitely looking forward to connecting with you again in the future and just having you back on as time goes on, as we continue to build both of our podcasts too. And to all of my audience and network out there, definitely go check out Jesse's podcast, Making Sense of It All. Also, if you have a business, you want to get the word out, feel free to send him a message. And so as we close out today, thank you all so much for joining and listening in. So next episode that will be coming up in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about box 12 of the W-2. So the box 12 of the W-2 has a plethora of codes. And so as everyone is going to file their taxes this time of the year, just wanted to provide you all with some insight on what those codes mean and just making sure that you're checking off all the boxes and that everything is correct on your side before you go to file. Jesse, thank you so much again for joining. We will continue to stay connected, continue to stay up to speed on one another. And I'm sure to my audience, we'll have him on again at some time soon.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.